So, in an objective sense, this was an absolutely disastrous weekend for Donald Trump. But I want to try to think about it from the perspective of the average Trumpist, because the left recognizing that Donald Trump has failed again doesn't really do much for us. We're already not voting for the guy in November of 2020. So let's review. Number one, Donald Trump has had to abandon pushing a question about citizenship into the 2020 census. The pressure became too great. The risk of delaying the census altogether grew too large. Courts were deciding against Donald Trump. So Trump is bailed out by saying, you know what, we're not going to keep going with the citizenship question on the census. But he tried to kind of save face by saying, well, we can get the citizenship information from existing federal records. Of course, why not just plan to do that from the beginning if it's so easy to get that information from records that already exist? But a definitive and total failure by Donald Trump. Another failure over the weekend is that Donald Trump's labor secretary has been forced to resign over his involvement in what was arguably immoral and potentially criminal involvement in a plea deal for accused sex trafficker and rapist and Trump friend Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I'm not actually saying that Alexander Acosta, Trump's now resigned or soon resigning labor secretary, is going to be convicted of any crime for his involvement in that plea deal. That's not how it works. There's immunity for prosecutors who participate in this way. But there is a case to be made that what took place violates multiple principles of how the justice system is supposed to operate by law. What took place is that Alexander Acosta, back when in Florida, he was handling Jeffrey Epstein's sex crimes case, struck a just ridiculous plea deal in 2008. And the pressure also started to mount, and Acosta is leaving, which ups the number of currently acting cabinet secretaries to 4, which is just absolutely ridiculous. The inability to fill important positions by the Trump administration is really an internal crisis that is not being covered nearly to the extent that it should. So by any objective measure, terrible weekend. Losing another cabinet secretary. The controversy around Jeffrey Epstein, it continues to inch closer and closer to Donald Trump himself. Remember that Trump is accused of raping the same 13-year-old girl that accused Jeffrey Epstein as well. And he gives up one of his big red meat nationalist ideas of the citizenship question on the census. But we all know that this is another failure, another set of failures by Donald Trump. We already weren't voting for him. So what we really need to do is dive into how the average Trumpist is going to see this. And this is really important, okay? The failure on some parts of the left to think about the Trump campaign as a right-winger would see it back in 2016 was a big blind spot. And we don't want to do this again in 2020. A Trumpist is going to see Trump's failure to get the citizenship question into the census as Trump just being held down by liberal activist judges. And they will say, see, we told you. This proves that nobody other than Trump cares about immigration. Trump wants to keep us safe. He's great. And all of these liberal activist judges are preventing Donald Trump from securing the United States from immigrants. A Trumpist will see the labor secretary resignation once again as that oppressive, regressive leftist mob that's bullying people and is intolerant and is forcing them out just to hurt Donald Trump. Now, what I've just told you is laughable to a clear-thinking person, but the Trumpist will see it and will be emboldened by this. So these things aren't going to move the needle in the battle to remove Donald Trump in the next election. Now, also just a funny and bizarre moment, Donald Trump in a public statement that he made defending Alexander Acosta just says Alexander Acosta is Hispanic, like as part of the defense, basically saying, hey, I had a Hispanic guy. How great is that? Take a look at this.
Alex called me this morning and he wanted to see me. And I actually said, well, we have the press right out here, so perhaps you just want to say it to the press. But I just want to let you know, this was him, not me, because I'm with him. He's a tremendous talent. He's a Hispanic man. He went to Harvard, a great student.
I didn't want him to resign. He's smart and he's Hispanic. But the most telling thing is that Donald Trump feels bad for Acosta. Okay. Acosta participated in brokering a disgusting plea deal. A normal person would see the situation and they would say, wow, I feel really bad for Epstein's victims who saw Epstein get a ridiculously lax deal of, I think it was 13 months, and I don't know exactly how much of that he ultimately served. And instead, Trump feels bad for the attorney who had the gall to strike such a ridiculous and immoral plea deal with a predator, the likes of Jeffrey Epstein. These are really dark times. Everything is backwards, but if we ignore it, if we just say, hey, I'm a leftist, here are my values, here's how I react to what Donald Trump is doing, we're missing the boat. That's not going to help us win in 2020, and we need to win. I want to win. So we've got to be thinking about these things in terms of how will a Trumpist see and interpret them. And I'm going to continue trying to do that as we get closer and closer to the 2020 election.